Hi there. In this lecture we see Azerbaev against Mikhail Tal in 1955. We see after e4 Tal plays the Caro-Kann defense. We see d4, d5, the advanced variation, and now an immediate c5, c4, knight c6, d takes, and now Tal plays it as though it's a kind of Albin counter gambit with this d4 move. This is a very, very interesting dynamic way of playing things, but it does sometimes weaken light squares in black's camp. An alternative, e6, seems overall as though it might be a little bit more solid, even though black gets the isolated queen spawn. Overall this is a little bit more solid, I would say, in my view. And here, for example, maybe d4 can be played under slightly better circumstances. In the game, I mean, this kind of position should be about even. In the game, though, with the commitment for d4 immediately, white plays bishop f4, we see e6, knight f3, bishop takes c5, a3, a5 to prevent b4, knight bd2, and the knight does have a very nice parking space, and with tempo. We see h6, knight e4, and now b6. Here, white can really sit on the light squares with huge comfort by playing bishop d3. Instead, white played knight f d2. This is a very strange move, really. With bishop d3, for example, bishop b7, white could castle and just sit very, very comfortably. This is a very, very nice knight on e4 here. And it would kind of reduce black's counterplay chances. A move like h4 as well, and h5. Black would be kind of restrained, and maybe even g4 later here to kick a knight and just bring the bishop back. Strong point e5. It does seem as though white overall would have a nice edge here, a nice advantage. But with knight fd2, this is a little bit on the passive side. We see knight ge7, and Tal doesn't mind at all this. Knight takes c5. It's actually a mistake playing this. In a way, it kind of lets go of white's advantages after knight e4. It looks dangerous on the surface. Knight d6 check, knight takes c5, but black just castles because, yeah, this pawn really, it's not great to take it. We see bishop g3. If taking the pawn, then there's knight g6. And here, in fact, a very, very calm move is actually the cool a5 to a4, rather than queen a5 check, winning the knight. And if knight d3, now knight takes e5, and this is fully equalizing. This sequence of events would fully equalize for black. Black would actually be with the advantage there. But bishop g3 was played. We do have knight g6 anyway, and now this commitment to f4. So the pawn is hemmed in by its own bishop, and black's light square bishop is also kind of looking as though it could be very, very useful on this diagonal. But now, okay, the c5 pawn is protected. Bishop d3, knight ce7, queen d2, knight f5, bishop f2, bishop b7. This is starting to look very, very cozy for black with this nice battery on this diagonal. However, in this position, even better than queen c6, based on modern engine technology, it seems as though the clamping move a4 could be an improvement. I actually remember Michael Adams, actually on my 18th birthday, talking about his loss to Sadler. It was the day he lost to Sadler. And he mentioned, Sadler could have played this counterplay crushing move, a4, and didn't. I thought that was odd. Here, it does actually suppress future counterplay in endgames. It does seem as though that's worth suppressing white's b-pawn to play it here. So as example, to take this further, there is a kind of bind on the position against the b-pawn, being a backward pawn, and this is a nice semi-open file. This does seem a positional approach worthy of consideration, at least. But queen c6 is also setting some problems up. We have rook e1, rook fd8. Again, here was another opportunity to play a4, just with clamping down strategy on the light squares generally. But rook fd8, and now we have a kind of irritated looking move from white. G4, this is a bit of a principle violation, because in principle you shouldn't be moving pawns around your king in principle. However, if white doesn't do much, black can actually, if b3 is played instead, then a4 there's always b4, but black's still a little bit better. However, maybe with rook a6, maybe black can look forward to a bit of a grind here anyway. But it would have been nice to seal down that pawn. But anyway, with this move g4, things become very interesting. They don't necessarily have to become as forced as the game continuation that quickly. Tal did play a lucrative looking move for sure, knight e3. Objectively, and this is a very interesting situation for our own games, with this battery striking across this diagonal, it seems, remarkably, black might actually be doing better to allow white to take on f5. So, for example, rook ab8, believe it or not, g takes, e takes. So the knight can't really move here. If knight g3, then queen g2 is mate. Given the knight cannot move, let's have a look at bishop g3. And in fact, even here, it's super dangerous. a4, as an example, bishop a8. This can all be calmly played, clamping down positionally, and just torturing that virtual pin. Basically, quite often in chess, you can either kind of try and exploit a pin immediately, or you can kind of celebrate the pin for several moves later. That's why, Nekhemyevich treats pins as both tactical and strategical. They can be quite long-term pins. And here, this long-term pin against the h1 square in this particular case is interesting. If king f1, there's even rook b3. This is actually possible, because if knight d6, just double the rooks. Yeah, doubling the rooks. And even this situation is still super nasty. So, for example, if bishop takes, that is absolutely fatal to bishop f3 here and mating. It turns out, yeah, this pin is absolutely remarkable. But this is kind of superhuman stuff. It doesn't seem as though, this needs like advanced calculation and stuff like that. So it's very, very interesting to be able to play like this if you can, but most people can't. They do try and resolve things like pins, try and get what seems to be a very, very cozy position anyway with this pawn sack. Black has the plan of doubling the rooks and putting pressure on the central squares. It seems a very, very logical plan in its own right. So let's have a look. Bishop takes was played, d takes, queen takes e3, rook d4. Now here, white starts to go a little bit wrong. There is pressure building up with the rooks going to double, and it looks very, very cozy with pressure in all directions, let alone possibilities of knight h4 if needed. White plays rook e2. It turns out here, queen g3 might be a good approach here, and if the doubling of the rooks, then bishop b1, and white is controlling some of the key entry squares as well as holding up e4, as well as stopping knight h4. So this seems to be even technically, but rook e2 was played instead, and we have rook ad8, and here we have actually a total unmitigated disaster move. White should play here bishop b1, and if the c4 pawn goes, okay, this is the lesser evil continuation, where in fact, for example, like this, black only has a small edge. That's least worst principle. Yeah, that would be the way to go. It looks as though it's quite dramatic for the black pieces, but it's only a small edge. But with rook d1, this is a total disaster. Can you see what Mikhail Tal plays in this position, which ends the game? It's a game-ending move. Black to play for 200 points. What would you play here? Okay. Rook takes e4. Yeah, rook takes e4. This is winning material. If bishop takes, we just take on d1. If queen takes, we're just taking on e4, and we've got the almighty pin. We're just a piece up in these variations. This is going to be easy. We can even take on f4 after. So yeah, rook takes e4 is a crushing blow here based on the pin. So just to recap here, white's chance to potentially equalize in this line was, it seems, with the move queen g3, just to recap here, and this bishop b1. It is also offering white some counterplay opportunities, which, you know, potentially on the cards with the queen placed, you know, x-raying the king, making f5 sometimes more effective. So it's a more dangerous proposition to take on c4. I mean, it's a game in its own right. But this is, it seems, by the evidence, this is the way to play things that white should have played, instead of going into this very, very nasty self-pin. Going into self-pins is generally, you know, I find it's good even to sacrifice a pawn or two sometimes to get opponents into a pin. And you don't have to exploit the pin immediately. You can kind of celebrate the pin over a number of moves, torture the pin. We see a very, very dramatic example behind the scenes in this game that actually engine technology is indicating that if we even have a pin to a square, basically a piece is pinned to a square, to celebrate it potentially in fine style, maybe should be entertained in our analysis. That knight e3 is a little bit committal, giving up a pawn, when in fact, if black gives up a knight instead for a pawn, this pin is rather painful, and black can actually, it seems, you know, build up. It's a remarkable kind of scenario, but it seems when we mark the b3 square and use that as well, things are really coming together tactically here against the white king. So very, very interesting variations here. For example, here with h5, and it seems as though, you know, white would be going downhill if king e2 then h4. It does seem very, very interesting that we can sometimes exploit pins through very, very subtle moves, not immediately trying to get some action. But knight e3, it did work on this occasion. Tal is playing humans. If he wasn't playing humans, you know, these kind of pawn sacrifices would be, you know, punishable more. Or here it will be defendable, but not with rook d1. That's a total disaster move, rook d1. So by this stage, though, with the queen on e3 rather than g3, it's not as good, and black can still, with best play it seems, get the advantage even with bishop b1. So an interesting game, showing how the early Tal is on the lookout for punishing pins severely. He's very, very tactical. It's not just about mating the opponent's king. He is torturing and exploiting pins very, very well at this point in his career. Okay, thanks so much. Hi there. Thanks for getting to the end of the YouTube video. If you would like to see other Mikhail Tal games, I actually have an amazing course for Mikhail Tal, which is currently at 4.9 with over 400 students. You can check this out from the Kingscrusher TV page. So Chess Strategy and Tactics, Mikhail Tal's amazing games. You can check out some free preview videos as well here. If you do expand all sections, you can see the preview links to get some free previews. So I hope you do check out this course index and the free previews. So I really had a thrilling time actually checking out Mikhail Tal's games. So yeah, the YouTube video here you saw was just a sample from this course. I hope you check it out. Okay, thanks so much. Oh, by the way, comments, questions, likes, shares, all appreciated. And if you did get to this, you know, part of the video, please do leave some sort of comment like Tal fan. Okay, thanks again.